Hello and welcome to Chaotic Insights, where today I break down the TV show Chaotic. And maybe the TV show isn't the only thing that's chaotic, so today we'll be talking about episode 30, The Curse of Korbek. Grab a snack, start your laundry, and we'll dive right in. Episode summary. Our four main characters are hanging out on a beach in Param when Tom stops and spots an island. The four of them leave their scanners behind on the beach and swim to the island. Tom goes further to explore the island while the others rest after their swim, and Tom gets caught in a trap. The others come to rescue him from falling into a pit of spikes. They keep exploring and find three pirate skeletons, so they start digging for treasure and they find a chest of overworld music. They put that chest in a rowboat and start heading back for the other beach, but Nothalax attacks, and he takes the chest of music. Then Antidion welcomes the group to his submarine, and they go after Nothalax. Antidion tells them about the legend of Korbek, how the island came to be cursed. While they look for Nothalax, they find Nothalax. There's an underwater battle, and Antidion uses one of the mysterious music on Nothalax to win the battle. We then learn the chest of music was full of the Song of Stasis. And then Kaz deduced what actually happened to the pirates. Their greed got the best of them, and they used the Song of Stasis on each other, leaving them to rot on the island, frozen for the rest of time. Analysis. Let's start with the title, The Curse of Korbek. We learned that the island isn't actually cursed. So their curse, the fatal flaw of these pirates, was greed. Greed was the curse of Korbek. They wanted to keep the music for themselves, so they all sabotaged each other, and therefore none of them got the music. Pretty explicit lesson and theme here. Being greedy has bad consequences, right? Being greedy backfires. And that's what the Curse of Korbek is. They never actually call it the Curse of Korbek in the episode. They, they call it the Legend of Korbek and how the island is cursed. But they don't call it the Curse of Korbek. And so the Curse of Korbek is greed. Don't be greedy. Don't fall for the curse. Don't be cursed by Korbek. Um, and that's a pretty explicit lesson. It's a pretty explicit theme. That's what this episode is trying to tell us. Don't be greedy. Now, let's talk about where this episode fits into the overarching narrative. First, this episode was set up by episode 28. This is the location that Peyton and Kaz got at the end of episode 28 when they were fluxing around Param and the flux bubble broke and it sent Peyton and Kaz here. So this is their first beachy day. They decide to just have fun and enjoy the location. And I think that's ultimately kind of sweet. Like, they go to Chaotic to hang out with their friends, but then they go to Param to hang out with their friends and mix it up. They're like, what if we went to the beach? And they went to the beach. Because they're not going to go to the beach in the real world, they live in different places. But they wanted to have a little beach day, and they had a little beach day, and I think that's fun and flirty. Now, you do have to think, did they put on their bathing suits before they ported to Chaotic so that their Chaotic self would have a bathing suit? Or did they, like, bring a change of clothes in their backpack? That's a question for another day. But I love these moments where we get to see that these characters are teenagers, and teenagers are just kids who want to have fun. And they build sandcastles, they tease each other, they're playing on the beach, they're reading books, they're doing all these things that are just for fun, just for enjoyment. And I love that we get to see them just relax and have a good time, and how that relaxing and having a good time showcases their dynamic with each other. And this episode is a hardcore introduction for the Song of Stasis. This is a music that they want you to remember. Why? Because there's a whole episode dedicated to it. Like, you're not going to remember a whole episode all about the Song of Stasis. And those are the two ways that this episode fits into the overarching narrative, is that it's the location that we got from the previous episode, and that this episode introduces the Song of Stasis, and they want you to remember that for the future. Why? Spoilers! But that's something they want you to remember, because it has major impacts. Now, the Song of Stasis music, it comes back in a major way towards the end of season 2, and this episode creates not only an understanding, but a familiarity with the music that you can connect to later. But it also, well, consider this exposition. This is exposition on what this music is, what its effects are, and how to use it, right? And how, like, left unchecked, like if you're stuck in the Song of Stasis, you're gonna be bones, you know? You're gonna be bones. And so the consequences of it as well. Now, moving on to lore. This is a great episode for lore. We get so much lore. Location. They establish the water between the island and the beach super deep. They establish that the first time they swim over it, so then when they come back and they learn that there are tunnels connected to the underworld, that checks out. Super deep, it goes all the way down to the underworld. And then we have this brilliant moment where the tunnel that connects to the underworld has warm current and therefore better supports vegetation. And so the tunnels that don't go to the underworld, colder current, right? The world building has an effect on what we see. If it's close to the underworld, it has warmth, the plants are growing better. It has energy. The cold currents don't. And so it is a logical conclusion for these tunnels to be that way. Now, that's all great information, but we also get this is another way that you can get from the underworld to the overworld. And we learn that Nauthilax is the expert on these underwater tunnels that connect the underworld and the overworld. So that confirms information that we get all the way back in episode 2, that there's some kind of nautical connection through the water between the underworld and the overworld, right? Nauthilax recognizes Tom and Sarah from episode 2 when they helped Mesmar fight Nauthilax. And because Nauthilax remembers their faces, that gives him reasonable suspicion not to trust this group and to inquire further about the chest, right? It's canonically sound. Like, if these were just new people, Nauthilax would be like, okay, you're weird, bye. But he recognizes them. He's like, I've seen you before, and you helped my enemy. The friend of my enemy is my enemy. So I'm going to be suspicious. I'm going to inquire further. It is canonically sound. And then, right, another connection, if that's not the passage, that's not the, the Maze of Lysic, that are a connection point between the overworld and the underworld. So now it makes sense why, it's so easy for all these underworld raids to happen all the time, is because there's not just the passage, but there's these tunnels and a maze, right? There's so many different connection points and opportunities for travel. And okay, while we're on the topic of Nauthilax, let's talk about what we learned from the Song of Stasis. And that's that it can last for a very long time, at least 500 years. And so when Antidion uses it on Nauthilax, that is one, rude, and two, murder? Like, he assures us that somebody will find him and reverse the music, and that, you know, he like blasts Nauthilax and sends him in the direction of the underworld, so somebody will find him and revive him. And that tells us that this music is probably reversible because, Nauthilax, of course, comes back as a character. And so, the music has to get reversed at some point, and he is safe. But, like, there's no way for Antidion to, like, assure that. What if nobody finds him? What if he's bones? What if in 500 years somebody finds his bones and they can't move because they're stuck in the Song of Stasis? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it feels more dangerous than Antidion sets it out to be. It justifies why this music needs to be hidden, I suppose. Like, why they buried it as buried treasure and why it was kept a secret is because it is dangerous and, like, you'll be bones. If nobody finds you, you'll be bones. But, like, somebody has to reverse it, right? It's permanent. It's reversible, but it's permanent unless it's reversed. You know what I mean? And so we're establishing stakes. We're establishing the mechanics of this music. And we do learn some lore about music themselves this episode, And that lore is that music is inscribed with markings on the inside, on the interior ring, that tells you what the music does. It tells the creature what it does. So we learn that there's an inscription on every music that helps you differentiate between them. Now it doesn't tell you like is it what's inscribed the title, is it the effects? I think it would be the effects is what I gathered from this information. But that's how you tell musics apart is because they're labeled with a label maker. Even though they all look the same from a distance, they are all different, they're all unique. And then finally, what we get in lore is units of measurement. So we get that in Param, a solon is about 500 years, which means one solon is about 6 months, or two solons is about a year, right? And solon obviously refers to the sun. What's that about? I don't know. But, so we get a unit of time, which is interesting. When I was watching this, I was like, I could have sworn in another episode that we confirmed that they use human time. And so I did a little bit of digging, and in episode 7, Odu Bathax gives them 1 hour to deliberate. And so I'm not crazy. And so maybe they have additional time markers, or like they have specialized ones like the Solon, but they use hours. So, we have hours and we have Solons, are the two confirmed time measurements in Param, which it seems like we need something in between there. But whatever. Information, world building, whatnot. Now we also get that nautical speed is measured in pneuma. That's interesting. Um, we get a unit of velocity, I suppose, and specifically for the water. We're underwater. It's like how boats and driving have different units of measurement. So we learned that this is specifically pneuma is a speed measurement for the boats, for the submarines. Now, on to fun facts and other notes. We get an aquatic fight, that's new, and we've seen air fights, we've seen land fights, but a water fight, that really mixes it up, sprinkle in something new. And a note I have is modest swimsuits. And it's moments like these where you remember that, ah, yes, this is a program aimed at children, and modesty is a value of that genre of programming, right? Like, they're all covered head to toe. They're all wearing shirt pants. They're wearing shirt pants. They're not wearing a two-piece, they're not wearing a bikini, they're not wearing like board shorts and a swim shirt. They're all wearing like scuba outfits. They're wearing head to toe, not head to toe, but they're wearing like high collared or like down to the ankle, except for Kaz. And so, like, what does the cut and color say about each of them? I'm not sure. Like, it's not tribe affiliation. Sarah gets an orangey brown. Danian, okay, that's her color, whatever. But Peyton gets blue, and Tom and Kaz both get green. And so Kaz normally wears green, Kaz gets green. But like Tom normally wears blue, and he gets green. And Peyton normally wears green, and he gets blue. That's interesting. And Kaz has a looser neckline. Like he has more of like a strongman, like wrestling singlet like neckline, whereas Tom has more of like a militaristic, like high collar. I'm not looking at it right now, but like that's what I'm imagining in my head. It's not militaristic, it's not like a military collar, but it is like it covers his neck. So I think that's interesting. Maybe that tells us that Tom's a little more uptight and Kaz is a little more loosey goosey, who's to say. But the color differentiation on these swimsuits, it's something interesting to note about these characters. And we get similar color differentiation on these monochrome pirates, where one is blue, one is green, and one is this like warmer toned cream brown situation. And I do think that it's interesting that these characters are designed in such a way where they're monochrome, but you can kind of tell that these creatures are designed to be like they were designed as skeletons first, and then they were just designed as creatures, and also that they're kind of throwaway creatures. Like there's nothing really spectacular or individualistic about each of them. they're all kind of monochromed except for some like accessories that make them pirates. And, they're just kind of throwaway characters. Korbek, love him, but, we meet him once and then never again. Just from a design perspective, it differentiates each of the pirates, and these bathing suits differentiate each of the characters to some extent. But like, why are these choices being made the way that they are? I want to know. Like, what was the thinking? Now, another note we have is that we get some new visual storytelling mediums. We get this parchment paper tableau of the pirate story, which is thematic, I guess. It's meant to show that it was a long time ago, and it frames it as a story and not as the truth. Like, this is the legend. We're not seeing we're not seeing a documentary film of what happened. This is what we perceive to be as true. So I find that interesting, especially, you know, they really like to mix up these storytelling mediums. Like, they mix up how they do flashbacks, they mix up how they do history. The last time we saw this kind of tableau parchment thing, I think, is when they were talking about the Kafka. We got like kind of parchment maps of like the overworld versus the underworld, which were less like, it was like one giant tableau versus this is like individual pictures where they like turn the page like they're telling a story. So that's interesting. Another note I have is that Sarah is kind of mean to Kaz in this episode, and I'm not condoning her actions. Like, she is the sarcastic character, but a couple of times I was like, let's not push this boundary. You can be sarcastic, but let's not be mean to Kaz. Like, lay off my man Kaz. And so, as much as I love Sarah, I am admitting that she has faults, and she was a little mean in this episode. Now, my final note that I have here in my fun fact and note section is a question. One question I have is so Nothalex's plan was to bring a chest of overworld music to the underworld. And my question is, why? you know, what is the motivation there? He like maybe it's deprivation. Like if the underworlds have this overworld music, then the overworlders can't use that music on them, right? Like I'm going to deprive you of the ability to have this resource so that you can't use it against my people. Okay, Nothalax. But also like, is there another reason? Like, can they experiment with it? Can they like reverse engineer it and create an underworld version of the music? Like, what is the benefit of having overworld music that you can't personally cast in the underworld? And I'm sure there's a reason, but they don't really fully explore it. And it's just, right, that's my question. Why? Nothalex, what was your plan? What are you planning on doing here? My final thoughts on this episode is I actually love this episode. It's light, it's fun. We get to see the kids being playful. We get to see this level of darkness and maturity of, right, this don't be greedy parable combined with like their bones. Like that's kind of dark and macabre. They were stuck there for over 500 years and they deteriorated because they couldn't move, right? They, I'm assuming were conscious, but they couldn't move. They, one, couldn't eat, so they starved. They couldn't drink. They dried up. They, like, all that's left is their bones. And they're stuck there because, like, it's, like, kind of horrific. And you could have definitely had a horror spin on that, but they didn't. They kept it light and fun with these elements that dig deeper, make you question. And, that's the vibe. Light and fun with deep elements that make you question. That's what you want. Or what you want, that's what I want. That's what I want. And I love to see the kids being kids, and I love that Sarah gets to drive the submarine, and I think it's funny when Tom presses every button on the attack panel just to like see what happens. He's like, attack, and he's like, I don't know what's gonna work, and so he just presses every button. That's funny. We get sufficient lore. We get lore about music. We get lore about the underworld. We get lore about these pirates. And we get a sufficient story. Like, we get a unique underwater battle. We get to learn about an island. learn about the people there, and we get to come back at the end of the day changed. Changed for the better. Because we learned not to be greedy. You know, don't let greed take you over. And, right, it's all in this like warm tropical location. And warm tropical locations, good for escapism. Why do you think they release beachy movies in like around Christmas? It's good for escapism. You know, when it's cold and dreary, you want to watch a beach. When you want to get away, you want to watch a beach. You know, and that's what this episode provides you. It provides you with that warm tropical location of you can just escape the warm or cold, dreary winter or the allergy bound spring or the cold and windy fall, and it brings you back to summer. And when you're in summer, it reminds you, hey, we're in summer right now. It's summer, I'm having a good time. You know what I mean? And all that being said, like maybe this has to be one of my top episodes. Like, it's fun, it's light, but what really I think bumps it up to the next level is that exposition that it lays for the Song of Stasis and how that impacts the story later. I think if that story later never happened, um, I'm thinking about the end of season two, of course. No spoilers for my first timers, but that end of season two, like if that didn't happen, I wouldn't love this episode as much because they're interconnected. And that's what bumps it up from just like, oh, this is a fun time episode, like, episode 28 when they get this location. That's just a fun, good time. Not too deep, not whatever. But this is like a fun, good time, add on. You get a level that's deep, add on, it's interconnected. It's what you want, it's what I want. And it's what I want. So it's up there in my episodes, and I have a good time watching it, usually. So, with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.